Hi, I'm back. So I know I haven't posted on this channel in like 6 months. Turns out that being a full-grown adult with a day job, his own business and a mortgage doesn't really leave a lot of time to post videos on the internet, but it's a bank holiday weekend and I've been thinking a lot about cheese, so let's talk about it. A few weeks ago, I came across a news story that I thought was so ridiculous, so silly and so implausible that it really just couldn't be true, which of course meant that it was 100% true because this world is absurd and life is just a series of ridiculous intersections tied together with silly string. But anyway, the headline was 1.4 billion pounds of cheese sits in Missouri cave. Yeah, that's right. Apparently there is over 1 billion pounds of cheese just sat in some caves in Missouri for like, I don't know, shits and giggles, I guess. And as you may or may not know, I have somewhat of an obsessive personality. And by that I mean that there's something inside me that just like latches onto things. And then I just need to know everything about it. And so when I found out about this, I went all the way down the rabbit hole. And what I found was like the weirdest butterfly effect of seemingly random events that are all weirdly interconnected. And they all have to do with cheese. But before we kick things off, before I guide you down the river Styx of cheese, down the river cheese Styx, I just wanted to contextualize exactly how heavy 1.4 billion pounds is. The Palace of Parliament in Romania is the heaviest building in the world. Inside this building is 1.5 billion pounds of steel and bronze. And there's 1.4 billion pounds of cheese just chilling in a cave somewhere. Meaning there's almost as much cheese underground as there is weight in/of a Romanian palace made of marble. Does that make any sense? I don't really know if that clarifies anything, but if you're still watching, you are clearly in the market for a semi-informative 45-minute video about cheese. So, let's get into it. Chapter 1. Why cheese? Okay, so to understand why the US is hoarding cheese, we need to go back to a place that I like to call history times. And yes, for anyone who's wondering, I will be citing my sources. They'll pop up on the screen somewhere in like, I don't know, a sexy lower third. Ooh. So in the 1930s, the US federal government established subsidies to bail out American dairy markets after the Great Depression. Then, later, the US Department of Agriculture established the Dairy Product Price Support Program. And that is a mouthful. It's also known as the Milk Price Support Program, and it came as part of the Agricultural Act of 1949. I am really giving you history times with all these years. I feel like I'm sitting my GCSEs again. Okay, but what did this act do? Well, the program was designed to provide price stability for dairy farmers by offering to purchase excess milk and other dairy products at a set minimum price. So let's break that down. Why would farmers need for the government to say to them, hey, we'll purchase your excess milk and other dairy products at like $4.50 a piece? On the screen right now are the actual calculations used by the Department of Agriculture and the CCC for exactly how much money you're going to get for your dairy products, but I don't really want to go through all this in that much depth because it will hurt my brain and you're already watching a 45-minute video about cheese, so I don't know, you can read it if you want. As it turns out, the reason for having 1.4 billion pounds of cheese isn't so much because of cheese as it is to do with milk. So much like the price of this pussy, The price of milk has always been volatile. It changes quite quickly and jumps up and down depending on things like limited supply and fluctuating demand. Again, much like this pussy. And because most milk comes from cows, it's also tied pretty regularly to calving season, which is, when cows have babies. So milk production rises when it's calving season and then falls during the winter months because, I don't know, I guess cows don't like to fuck in the cold. Does anyone else remember that scene in Charlie's Angels where Cameron Diaz shows her whole fist up a cow?
Hot water.
You're welcome. Back on track. As I mentioned, the production of milk varies depending on the season, but also the demand for milk varies depending on the season. And according to the reports that I read, the demand for milk is usually highest in the fall when children go back to school. I don't have kids, so I don't know why that is, but apparently kids like milk. So if you've been keeping up, we have issues with dairy supply and issues with dairy demand. And then to top it all off, to add a little flavor on top, what happens to milk if it's more than a week old? It spoils. And so if we have dairy farmers outproducing the demand for milk at any given time, we're going to end up with just a load of spoiled milk. And on the other hand, if they misjudge and for some reason, I don't know, there's an issue with calving yields one year, then we're not going to have enough milk. And that's the problem because people really like milk. And so to fix this, the government in the state stepped in and said, hey, dairy farmers, keep producing your milk. And then when you have excess, because it's better to have too much than not enough, we'll buy it from you at a stable minimum price. And we'll buy it from you in 3 forms: dry milk, butter, cheese. So bish bash bosh, Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, dairy markets will stabilize, and then when dairy production hits 125% of the support price, the US government will just start selling off its excess. And the process will start again. But we wouldn't be making this video if that process had worked now, would we, my sweet summer child? Nothing's ever really that simple. Things that seem like a closed loop on paper often have really far-reaching and completely unintended consequences. So what may have started out as just a nice way to help bail out dairy farmers after the Great Depression quickly spiraled into this huge tangled web of bullshit. So as it turns out, having the government buy up all this cheese did indeed stop prices from dipping too low. But they also put a cap on how high the prices could get, which kind of meant that the market just really stagnated and stuck in this really level middle position, which meant that everybody had enough of the milk and cheese that they needed, and then the government just couldn't sell off this huge excess of cheese that it was generating as a result of its support program. And they couldn't just cut the support to the dairy farmers because it wasn't like milk was, I don't know, suddenly long life or anything. So what happened? Well, nothing happened. It led to a massive oversupply in cheese stocks. The government became dirty little cheese hoarders. The government is Gollum and cheese is its ring. Only, I guess, instead of 1 ring, it's 1.4 billion pounds of cheese in the shape of a ring. The 1.4 billion pound cheese ring? I don't know. And then you cut to today, where milk consumption is down 42% because everyone is fucking lactose intolerant all of a sudden, and everyone's drinking almond milk, and there we have it. Soy boys ruined the economy. Okay, so that's not what happened. Let's jump back to the 50s and explain how the government tried to get rid of some of its cheese stock. So obviously the government was trying to sell the cheese, but nobody wanted it. So what did they do instead? They introduced government cheese. So government cheese was first introduced during World War II in order to provide cheese from the central government to military personnel and just to the general population. And quite frankly, that was a really good way to get rid of some of the excess cheese stores that had just been racking up because of the legislation put in place a decade earlier. And then later on in the 1950s, the government started handing out this cheese to welfare recipients, which meant that the massive overstock in produce was being put directly into the hands of the people who could probably make the best use out of it, which, hey, I'm all for government support programs that seem to be altruistic. But I guess kind of sadly, in the States, it didn't really go down that way because the government's welfare cheese program would continue all the way throughout the 70s and 80s, and I'm pretty sure it's still in place today. But it did lead to government cheese kind of becoming a symbol of poverty and government dependency. Welfare bitches eat cheese. It is known. But because the government was just buying up all this excess cheese and powdered milk and butter that was, coming from farmers who'd already made their general stock, they didn't really care if what they made and gave to the government was super high quality or super low quality, because, well, there was a minimum price set on it, so you're not gonna spend a load of time making them some fucking artisanal Gouda if, hey, American slab block cheese will do and you're gonna get the same price for it. So it kinda tastes like shit. And then because, people are funny, this led to government cheese being dubbed rat cheese, which, really isn't the nicest way to speak about the most impoverished people in your nation. I get it. Yeah, it could be looked at as you're saying, oh, this is cheese only a rat could eat, but also it's given to welfare people. You're literally calling them rats. Just optically, maybe not the best, but who am I to give a lesson in optics to the nation that created Donald Trump? So, my bad. But okay, let's be fair about this. The government didn't have any bad intention when giving this cheese out to the masses, right? They literally just supplied an overstock of produce that they had to the group of people in society who could benefit from it most. Surely that's altruism. Well, I guess the problem with that, and this is probably gonna sound just a smidge hyperbolic, governments are evil, soul-sucking money dumps designed to maintain total control over a population and tax us at every single corner and just destroy us from the inside out. But, at least here in the UK, if you work for them, they give you a really good pension, so I would like to work for you, please.
Chapter 2. The government's big cheesy balls.
Let's take a couple of steps back to the 1980s. President Ronald Reagan gets into office, and I guess he's kind of upset that the US government has just, been stockpiling cheese for the past 30 years, and he's like, what the actual fuck? So, on the 22nd of December, 1981, he releases, just a little statement, and it says,
The dairy price support program in this country has resulted in the stockpiling of millions upon millions of pounds of cheese by the Commodity Credit Corporation. At a time when American families are under increasing financial pressure, their government cannot sit by and watch millions of pounds of food turn to waste. I am authorizing today the immediate release of £30 million from the CCC inventory. The cheese will be delivered to the states that request it and will be distributed free to the needy by non-profit organizations. The 1981 Farm Bill I signed today will slow the rise in price support levels, but even under this bill, surpluses will continue to pile up. A total of more than £560 million of cheese has already been consigned to warehouses, so more distributions may be necessary as we continue to root out waste in government and make the best possible use of our nation's resources.
There's also a picture of this dude just holding up a moldy ass block of cheese being like, what do I do with it? What do I do with all the cheese? When you think of Reagan, like immediately, what do you think of? Crack. But now what do you think of? Crack and cheese. That was in the 80s. They just kept trying to get rid of it, kept trying to get rid of it, kept trying to get rid of it. Found that if they stored it in caves, you know, it meant that they didn't have to pay electricity to keep all this cheese refrigerated. So great. They moved it to some caves, which, I mean, like if you've got the caves and they're just sitting there, then you may as well put the cheese in the caves if the caves are, you know, the perfect temperature and made of like lime scale or limestone or whatever the fuck to keep the cheese. Whatever, fine, put the cheese in the caves. But like, the question still remains, what are we gonna do about the cheese? I seem like I'm going a little bit off piece here, but don't worry, it all ties back to cheese in the end. So there's this thing called food insecurity, and that is the condition of not having enough food or not having access to an adequate quality of food to maintain a basic standard of living. And I guess maybe somewhat counterintuitively, there's a fair amount of data to suggest that there is a strong link between food insecurity and obesity. Like, you just think that the people who couldn't afford to eat just wouldn't have any food, right? Wrong. Or at least wrong in most Western countries, where if you're hungry and you're broke, you can buy one salad for 13 pounds, or you can buy 13 hamburgers for 13 pounds. And guess which one is going to feed a family of 4?
You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad.
Now, don't forget that I mentioned earlier that US government cheese is super low quality. And do you know what else is super low quality? Pretty much all fast food. They are scientifically engineered to be low in price, high in shit, and really addictive. You know what would be really interesting? Is if the government just made a team whose entire job it was just to get cheese just funneled right down the necks of the public. Or at least to really increase milk consumption. That way we could, you know, kind of stop some excess cheese from coming in for a few years and then we could sell off the cheese supplies or at least really reduce them. And what if the US Department of Agriculture, like the same department in the middle of an anti-obesity drive, just helped to promote that company? Wouldn't that be swell? Because after all, you really need to eat this fucking cheese.
Chapter 3. Eat the cheese, anime!
Okay, so according to the centralized collection of all of the knowledge on Earth, otherwise known as Wikipedia, yes, I got lazy, but I don't care. Wikipedia is a source. Sue me. Dairy Management Inc. is an American trade association primarily funded by the US Dairy Promotion Program, which in itself is funded by government-mandated checkoff fees on dairy products and tax dollars directly dedicated to promoting the sale of US-produced dairy products. So what this means is that Dairy Management Inc. isn't technically a government program because, you know, it isn't set up directly and funded directly by the US government, but it is funded by government mandated fees on dairy farmers and dairy products. Like, they have to pay those fees in order to get the license to be a dairy farmer. And if they don't, then they're unregulated and the government will shut them down. So it's like I can't call Shawn Mendes a big hungry bottom, but we all know that Shawn Mendes is a big hungry bottom. You know what I'm saying? So Dairy Management Inc.'s job, its entire reason for existing is to make people eat dairy. And they were some of the masterminds, obviously along with an ad agency and some other people, behind the hugely successful Got Milk campaign.
Tom, can I make a suggestion?
You're fired!
Welcome to eternity.
Heaven! Wait a minute. Where am I?
Got milk?
This campaign made the consumption of milk absolutely skyrocket. There was a huge boom in the dairy markets, which had the knock-on effect of kind of pumping the brakes on all of the excess cheese that the government was being forced to buy up. In turn, this gave the federal government a little bit of breathing room and allowed them to kind of sell off a lot of the excess cheese that they had accumulated to companies like Kraft, who, you know, will literally sell you cheese that comes squirting out of a tin. Delicious and nutritious. But before this happened, Dairy Management Inc. kind of made it its goal, its raison d'etre, its reason for being, to encourage the use of really low-grade cheese and make it way more attractive for businesses and consumers. From 2009 onwards, Dairy Management Inc. began working with Domino's Pizza.
You wanna buy some Domino's Pizza? Domino's Pizza? Pizza. Pizza? Domino's Pizza? Domino's Pizza? I hate you, fat Lizzo.
Why? In order to increase the amount of cheese in Domino's offerings. And in return, gave them a $12 million ad campaign and a whole bunch of free cheese. And so, true to their word, Domino's came out with a product called the Wisconsin Pie. This pie had 6 cheeses on top and 2 additional cheeses in the crust. Yum! And in a lab test of said Wisconsin pie, it was found that 1/4 of a thin crust contained 12 grams of saturated fat, which is more than 3/4 of your daily maximum. So 1 slice and you're pretty much done for the entire day. And they didn't just work with Domino's. No, that would be too easy. They also worked with Pizza Hut, McDonald's, and Taco Bell. The New York Times even did an expose on this, noting, in a series of confidential agreements approved by agriculture secretaries in both the Bush and Obama administrations, Dairy Management has worked with restaurants to expand their menus with cheese-laden products. Consider the Taco Bell steak quesadilla with cheddar, pepper jack, mozzarella, and a creamy sauce. The item used an average of 8 times more cheese than other items on their menu, the Agriculture Department said in a report, extolling Dairy Management's work without mentioning that the quesadilla has more than 3/4 of the daily recommended level of saturated fat and sodium. They also worked with McDonald's to replace canola oil with butter, which shifted around 700 million pounds of converted milk, and worked with them to make their cheese slices 30% larger for McDonald's signature sandwiches. And lest we forget, also worked with them to create the Angus cheeseburger, which was sadly discontinued. But are you sensing the theme? Cheese. Low quality, high fat, rat cheese. Now, am I saying that the government is incentivizing the consumption of terribly unhealthy amounts of cheese to allow it to continue propping up dairy farms and thereby maintaining agricultural jobs, which also has the knock-on effect of contributing to the obesity epidemic and maintaining food scarcity, which is capitalized on by greedy corporations, which the government can then tax and also sell its surplus to, thereby creating a never-ending cycle of shit in which every action production. Even something altruistic like government aid has an equal and opposite reaction that also just produces more shit. Well, I'm not saying that. And okay, so this might be a good place to kind of shoehorn in there that I'm not just shitting on lowly dairy farmers, you know, for kicks, because it makes me feel good. There are about half as many dairy farmers now as there were in 2003, and that's a loss of like almost 40,000 dairy farms. And I even found this one interview by this dairy farmer named Tom Murray because he had to like sell off some of the offspring of his prized heifer. And apparently she held like the world record for the most amount of milk produced. So like that's really sad for him and everything. And I'm sure Tom is great. And dairy farming is, you know, a needed industry, but these programs are just not working. Cheese production can have a pretty substantial environmental impact, particularly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, water use, and land use. You need a lot of water in order to make the cheese from the milk, which can lead to water scarcity in certain areas. The cows need to eat and graze, and this can lead to soil erosion. It goes on and on and on. But what really gets my goat about this is that on the one hand, the US government is saying to people, put down the cheese, you fat fuck. It is clogging your arteries. There's an obesity epidemic. Stop it. Oh, please stop it. And then that same agency turns around and then pays people or indirectly pays people through government levies to go around to corporations and introduce new methods of eating cheese just so they can get rid of some of the excess that they produce by subsidizing dairy industries. And for some reason, this Ouroboros that's just eating itself alive is just unquestioned because it maintains jobs in the dairy industry. But even if you look at it in its most simple terms, in the terms that the government can understand, cash money, the dairy industry makes around $41.8 billion a year. Obesity costs the US taxpayers $1.72 trillion in 1 year. One of these things is not like the other. Anyway, with all that out of the way, I would like to leave you with the comforting words of the US Department of Agriculture. You know, the villain in this story. Because they made a statement on this issue, which reads, when eaten in moderation and with attention to portion size, cheese can fit into a low-fat, healthy diet. So the same agency that through levies subsidized the creation of a Domino pizza with 8 different types of cheese, one slice of which was more than 3/4 of your daily recommended intake, says don't worry about it, hun. Just eat it in moderation. But hey, I guess we can just all rest happily knowing that I guess the government is gonna continue with whatever it's doing and there's just still gonna be like 1.4 billion pounds of cheese just chilling in some caves. So with all that said and done, I really want to go order Domino's, which I know I probably shouldn't, but I did check and they do not have the Wisconsin on the menu, probably because it would be banned here in the UK for very obvious reasons. I'm sorry, US Department of Agriculture, but I hope you liked this video and I hope you enjoyed taking a deep dive into the secret history of American cheese. Be sure to stay tuned for some more deep dives whenever a random subject grabs me by the bollocks, because I kind of feel like I'm not quite done with this story. Like, part of me thinks that there's something else. There's another layer to this, and I kind of want to look back a little further. Like, I want to know
really why the dairy industry started to go to shit in the 30s. Like, why that industry of all industries? Like, why was that one propped up so heavily? That really, I don't know. I haven't quite gone back that far, but maybe I'll make a second video, the secret history of the secret history of American cheese. But I think I need a little break from saying the word cheese. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. You can find links to all my socials in the description box down below. And until next time, kisses from England. Bye guys.